Princess Orlin did not choose the human because he looked dangerous. And that was why the royal guard laughed when she named him her escort. In the mirrored Hall of Crowns, beneath banners taken from 1,000 conquered moons, Captain Vaer of the Sapphire Guard folded all 4 armored arms and asked if the princess had spoken incorrectly, because the creature beside her was small by imperial measure, soft-skinned, narrow-shouldered, plain-faced, wearing a dark travel coat instead of ceremonial armor, with no visible blade except a short utility knife on his belt, no plasma lance, no crest of rank, no neural shield crown, not even a family sigil worth noticing. His name was Elias Rook, a human from Earth, and the only unusual thing about him was how calmly he stood, while the most lethal soldiers in the palace judged him unworthy to guard a royal life. Orlin heard the laughter move through the guard ranks like polished metal scraping stone. The Sapphire Guard had defended the royal bloodline for 9 generations, each member bred, selected, and reshaped for violence. Bones laced with resonant steel, eyes trained to track particle fire, reflexes sharpened in vacuum duels before most species learned to walk. To them, a human escort was not merely foolish, it was an insult. Vaer stepped close until his chest plates nearly touched Ilias's face and said, "The princess walks today through hostile territory. Ambassadorial crowds, noble houses with assassins in their debt, and factions who would profit from her death. Are you prepared to die in the first second?" Human Elias looked up, not offended, not impressed, and answered, "If I die in the first second, Captain, then I planned badly." That was the first moment the room stopped laughing. Only for a breath, only because the answer was to calm. Then Vaer smiled with all his sharp lower teeth and turned back to Orlin. "Your Highness, this is a charming pet choice, but not a security decision." Orlin kept her face still. She had spent her life surrounded by guards who treated her safety like property they owned, not a trust they served. She had chosen Elias after the border negotiations on Hessa Prime, where he had noticed a poisoned air filament hidden inside a ceremonial flower before 3 scanners did. He had not bragged, not demanded a medal, not even corrected the official report when the guard took credit. He simply watched rooms as if every wall had once betrayed him. And Orlin had learned to value that kind of seeing. So she raised her chin and said, "My decision is final. Commander Rook will escort me to the Unity Conclave. The Sapphire Guard will accompany at secondary distance. The Unity Conclave should have been a symbol of peace held on the floating city of Lumiere, where glass bridges curved between sky towers and diplomats from enemy systems met under enforced neutrality. But peace always attracted predators. Orlin's father, the Emperor, was dying. Her brothers were dividing allies like carrion birds, and her public appearance would announce whether she had enough support to claim regency. If she stumbled, if she looked afraid, if blood touched her gown in front of the cameras, entire sectors would tilt toward civil war. The Sapphire Guard knew this and resented the human more because of it. They wore shining blue exaustials and carried honor spears that could cut through tank holes, while Elias walked 1 step behind Orlin's left shoulder with an old kinetic pistol under his coat and a small slate in his hand, tapping occasionally as if bored when they landed at the conclave dock. The official reception waited with gold carpet, anthem choir, honor line, foreign envoys smiling with predatory patience. Elias stepped out first, against all protocol, and paused at the top of the ramp. He let the pause stretch until the choir faltered, then turned and offered his hand to Orlin. Vaer hissed that the human had embarrassed the crown, but Orlin saw what Elias had seen: 6 balconies facing the ramp, 4 reflective statues, 2 drone service hatches, and a perfect ceremonial delay where an assassin could fire during the anthem's highest note. By interrupting protocol, Elias had broken every timing estimate prepared in advance. Orlin took his hand and descended 3 beats early. The anthem restarted awkwardly behind her, and somewhere in the upper left balcony, a flower arrangement moved 1 centimeter out of place. The first attack never looked like an attack. That was the part the Royal Guard missed. A young attendant from the Nisari delegation approached with a bowl of river pearls, trembling beautifully, eyes lowered, no weapon signature. No toxin trace, no hostile pulse in her blood. Vayer scanned her and found nothing. Tom stepped aside. Elias moved before the attendant crossed the last tile. He did not shout, he simply dropped his slate. And when it struck the floor, the attendant's eyes flicked down for a fraction. But the pearl bowl did not. It remained level because it was guided by internal stabilizers. Elias kicked the bowl upward. Pearl shells cracked open in mid-air and released threads of silver filament that would have laced through Orland's lungs. His pistol was already out by the time the filaments bloomed. 3 shots shattered the stabilizer core. 1 shot broke the false attendant's wrist. And the 5th shot hit a balcony statue where the remote handler had hidden behind mirrored stone. The royal guard moved after it was over. Cameras caught everything, Vayer scanning an innocent face. Tom stepping aside, Orland standing calm, and the human destroying an assassination device before anyone else understood there had been one. Diplomats screamed, guards drew weapons, drones swarmed. Vayer thundered orders and tried to reclaim authority. Elias ignored all of it. Grabbed Orland by the wrist and pulled her off the gold carpet into a service corridor. Vayer caught up at the bend, one spear blade glowing blue at Elias's throat. "You do not drag the air of the Empire like cargo," he snarled. Elias pressed 2 fingers against the spear shaft and gently moved it aside. "I do when cargo has a crown, and everyone wants it." The corridor led toward a private lift, but Elias stopped before the doors opened. His head tilted, listening. The guards heard only distant chaos. Elias heard the lift engine running too smoothly. Felt the faint pressure change of a shaft sealed at the wrong level. Smelled coolant that had no reason to be warm. He ripped open a maintenance panel. Pulled out 3 wires with his teeth while his hands worked the manual override. And the lift doors opened, not onto a cabin, but onto empty shaft space, falling to kilometers through the underside of the floating city. Tom cursed. Vayer stared into the drop, and Orland felt a cold line move down her spine. Because if the human had trusted the cleared route, she would already be falling through clouds. Still, the Sapphire Guard did not learn. Pride does not die from one lesson. It limps into the next one. Vayer insisted they move to the reinforced diplomatic chamber, a fortress room with shield walls, independent air, and 1 entrance. Every instinct in him loved it because it looked defensible. Elias hated it immediately because anything with 1 entrance also had 1 exit. Vayer accused him of improvising without command authority. Elias accused the guard of confusing armor with control. Until Orland raised 1 hand and chose the human's route again, Vayer's face hardened, and that humiliation would matter. Because someone inside the conclave security net was watching them. Adjusting the trap every time the princess chose survival over tradition, Elias took them into the servant arteries of Lumiere. Narrow passages behind walls of polished glass, used by cleaners, cooks, machine tenders, and invisible workers royal maps rarely bothered to name. The Sapphire Guard had to retract shoulder plates to fit. Their beautiful weapons scraped pipes, their formation broke every 10 steps. Elias moved easily through the cramped maze, asking frightened staff brief questions. He learned that a cleaning shift had been replaced, ventilation drones had been delayed, and 2 storm engineers had vanished before dawn. Each fact was small, but humans had made an art of small facts. They survived not by ignoring tiny wrongness, but by collecting it until the shape of death appeared. Then the city shook, a deep metallic groan rolled through the passage. Lights dimmed, gravity tilted 1/2 a degree. And far below them, one of Lumiere's storm engines coughed blue fire into the clouds. Ilias's slate flashed with a city grid he was not supposed to access, and the truth assembled faster than comfort. The assassins were not simply trying to kill Oraline. They were using her presence to trigger a succession crisis and drop the entire conclave into the storm sea. Every diplomat, witness, and rival heir would die in one spectacular accident. The Empire would tear itself open, and whoever survived would blame whoever was convenient. Orland looked at Elias and saw that he had already understood. Not because humans were magic, not because he was fearless, but because he expected betrayal to come layered, patient, and practical. The real trap was never the blade at the princess's throat. The real trap was the floor beneath everyone's feet. Vare finally asked, "What do you need?" The words came out like broken glass. Elias pointed to 3 guards. You, and the angry one, with me. The rest moved the princess through that crawl line to the storm chapel. Its anchors connect to old foundation struts. Not the new grid. Vare refused to leave Orlin. Elias stepped close enough that only the captain heard the next words. "If you stay near her because your pride is bleeding, you will make her slower. If you go where I put you, you might still be useful." Vare's upper hands twitched toward violence. Then Orlin spoke. "Captain, follow his command." For the first time in his career, the leader of the Sapphire Guard obeyed a human. They descended through maintenance shafts, while Lumiere began to die around them. Wind screamed through cracked pressure seals. Emergency shutters slammed one by one, somewhere above. Crowds stampeded across glass promenades as official security tried to explain impossible failures. Elias moved at the front with a stolen maintenance torch and his old pistol. Vare behind him, Tom, and another guard named Sierra, forcing doors when machinery warped shut. Vare expected the human to tire. Humans always tired, their muscles burned. Their lungs wasted air, their bones lacked reinforcement. Yet Elias kept moving through heat, smoke, and falling sparks with a grim economy that made no movement ornamental. He did not look heroic, and that unsettled Vare more than heroism would have. Heroes performed, Elias worked, at the first engine node. They found the missing storm engineers wired into their own consoles. Still alive, neural jacks pulsing black against their skulls. Forced to authorize cascade failure with their own command codes, Vare lifted his spear to cut the cables. Elias slammed his arm down. "No, wrong order. Kill the pain first, then the link." Vare snarled that seconds mattered. Elias snapped back that living minds mattered too. And for once the human's voice cracked like a weapon. He opened a medkit, injected blockers into the engineers' necks, waited while their convulsions slowed, then shot the link nodes one by one. The engine's death spiral paused at 27% collapse. Not stopped, but delayed enough to matter. That was when the Royal Guard began to understand the human was not soft because he cared. He cared because he had seen what happened when warriors stopped. The assassins waiting beyond the second node were Knoll Choir operatives. Silence-masked killers used by noble houses when they wanted bodies without fingerprints. 12 of them unfolded from the dark-like shadows, deciding to have knives. The Sapphire Guards surged forward in a blaze of blue spearlight. Magnificent, disciplined, exactly as the killers expected. The first 2 operatives died. The next 4 triggered mirror fields that multiplied false bodies through the narrow chamber. Vare struck 3 illusions before a real blade opened his side. Sierra's shoulder armor sparked under monofilament wire. Elias dropped to the floor, rolled under the field angle, and fired into the sprinklers. Water burst across the chamber, clinging to real bodies and passing through false ones. Then his pistol moved with ugly human simplicity. Center mass, knee, wrist, throat, guard, weapon hand, no flourish. No dueling chant, no honorable exchange. Just problem solving at lethal speed when it ended. Vare was bleeding through his side plates and staring at 6 dead assassins. The human had not fought like a warrior, but erased like errors in a system. Elias helped him stand. Vare expected mockery, but the human only tightened a pressure seal over the wound and said, "Your left guard drops when you favor the lower arms. Fix it or die." Then the cum cleared for 3 seconds, and Orlin's voice came through. "Elias, the chapel doors are breached." There was noise behind her, civilians crying, guards shouting. Something heavy hitting metal. Elias's face emptied. All exhaustion removed by a force Vare suddenly recognized. Not rage, not loyalty alone, but a human response to someone trapped and depending on him. Save the city, or save the princess. Impossible choices were where weak people broke. But humans had a habit of breaking the choice instead. Elias pointed at the engine core access. "Vare, Tom, Sierra, finish the shutdown. Use the blockers first." Shoot any console speaking with a voice delay. Trust staff over royal channels. Vaer said, and you, Elias was already running. I'm going to make a very bad idea arrive on time. He vanished into the smoke before anyone could argue, leaving 3 royal guards with orders from a human and no time left to resent them. Vaer stared after him, then turned to the corridors and said, "Move." Because the Sapphire Guard did not become useful again when they remembered pride. They became useful when they set it down. The storm chapel hung beneath the conclave tower, an ancient chamber built around one of Lumiere's original anchor spines. Its floor was transparent crystal. Below it, lightning crawled through endless cloud. Orlin stood near the altar with 20 civilians, 2 wounded guards, and diplomats who had stopped pretending not to be terrified. Outside the dented doors, something hammered with mechanical patience. Not beasts, not soldiers, but a diplomatic security walker hijacked by the assassins, its cutting arms chewing through the seal. Orlin held a fallen guard's sidearm in both hands and understood that princesses in songs always looked brave because songs skipped the shaking.
Ow.
She thought of her father dying, her brothers circling, her people watching, and Elias somewhere in the collapsing city. Then the chapel doors burst inward. The walker entered like a steel insect. Blades unfolding, eye lens red with foreign code. The wounded guards fired and were swept aside. Orlin fired until the weapon clicked empty. The walker raised one cutting arm toward her. Then a maintenance skiff crashed through the stained glass ceiling. It was so absurd that even death seemed to hesitate. Elias came down with the skiff, half riding, half falling, engine screaming. One hand locked on the controls, the other firing through the windshield. The skiff slammed into the walker and drove it sideways across the chapel floor. Crystal cracked beneath both machines. Wind exploded into the chamber. Civilians screamed as the floor began splitting over open sky. Elias kicked through the broken skiff door, blood on his forehead, coat burning at one sleeve. Pistol empty, no time to reload. The walker pulled itself upright. Damaged but not dead, and charged. Elias drew the little utility knife everyone had mocked in the Hall of Crowns. Vaer would later swear the humans smiled then, not because he expected to win, but because the machine expected him to run. Orlin saw what the Royal Guard had failed to understand all morning. Elias never fought the strongest part of anything. He found the part that had to be weak, the hinge, the habit, the assumption, the unguarded second between attack and recovery. As the walker struck, he stepped inside the blade arc, let the flat of the arm smash his shoulder instead of the edge cutting him in half, and drove the utility knife into a service latch beneath the optic housing. The blade snapped, but the latch opened. He shoved his burned hand inside the machine's head and ripped free a cluster of wet fiber cables. The walker convulsed, caught him across the chest, and hurled him into the altar hard enough to break stone. Then it toppled through the cracked crystal floor and vanished into the storm below. For one breath, nobody moved. Then Orlin reached Elias and found him alive, barely, coughing blood. Furious about it, as if injury were an inconvenience. He tried to speak and failed. She leaned close, expecting some final noble line, but Elias whispered, "Behind you." Because of course he did, because even half-conscious. He was still watching the room. Orlin turned and saw the last assassin, disguised as a junior diplomat. Lifting a shard pistol from beneath his sleeve, she fired the empty sidearm by instinct, and nothing happened. The assassin smiled. Then Captain Vaer's spear punched through the chapel wall and through the assassin's chest from the other side. The Sapphire Guard had arrived. Not in glory, but covered in engine grease, blood, and human instructions. The engines stabilized minutes later, not elegantly, not fully, but enough that Lumiere stopped falling. Broadcasts across the conclave resumed to show a princess kneeling beside a wounded human, royal guards carrying civilians, captured assassins dragged from maintenance tunnels by staff who had been ignored all their lives, and Captain Vaer ordering every Sapphire Guard to stand down unless Commander Rook gave a direct security instruction. The political impact was immediate and irreversible. Orlin did not look weak, because a human had saved her. She looked dangerous because she had chosen the one protector in the room intelligent enough to see the whole battlefield. Noble houses that had funded the attack began burning records before sunset. Envoys who had doubted her claim requested private meetings and across the empire. Citizens replayed the footage of the humans stepping from protocol, exposing poison, refusing the death lift, saving engineers, breaking assassins, crashing through chapel glass, and whispering one last warning when any normal warrior would have begged for praise. By nightfall, the entire royal guard knew why she had chosen him. Weeks later, at her regency declaration, Princess Orlin walked through the Hall of Crowns again. With all houses watching, the Sapphire Guard in full formation, and Elias Rook at her left shoulder, still pale, still healing, still refusing ceremonial armor because he said it made him move like furniture. This time no one laughed. Captain Veyer personally cleared the path, not by marching ahead but by studying corners, reflections, staff rotations, and maintenance panels the way Elias had taught him. The guard had changed, not softened, sharpened. They learned that honor did not require predictable movement, that courage did not require loudness, that a protector's first duty was not to look impressive, but to make sure the attack failed before it became dramatic. And when Orlin reached the throne dais, she turned to the assembled empire and said, "Many asked why I placed my life in human hands. Today I answer plainly. Because the strongest guard is not the one who promises to die for me. It is the one who makes certain fewer people must." The hall remained silent after that, not from shock, but from recognition, the kind that rewrites tradition inside the mind. So when the archives recorded the day Princess Orlin chose a human as her escort, they did not describe his height, his species rating, or the small knife that broke in his hand. They recorded the lesson every guard cadet would memorize for centuries: never laugh at the quiet protector. Never trust the safest route just because it is polished. Never confuse ceremony with security. And never assume a human is weak because he does not look eager for violence. Because on Lumiere, beneath a falling city, the royal guard learned the truth too late to keep their pride, but just in time to keep their princess alive, and from that day forward. Whenever danger entered a room wearing a beautiful face, the Sapphire Guard looked first to the human at the princess's shoulder, and waited for the tiny movement that meant he had already seen the knife.